You're listening to The Social Workers on WCDB Albany.
And joining me this morning is author of Loving Yourself, The Mastery of Being Your Own Person, Dr. Sherrie Campbell. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good morning.
Great to have you on the show this morning, Sherrie.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Okay, your book, Loving Yourself. I mean, there are a lot of people who love themselves and a lot of people, I guess, who don't love themselves. So what is the purpose of this book? What's it going to do for us if we read this, Loving Yourself?
The purpose of Loving Yourself is to teach you to consistently be centered inside yourself instead of needing, wanting, looking always for something on the outside to fulfill you.
So if we're centered and we're not always looking for somebody else to satisfy us, what does that do? Why do we need to do this?
Your life will shift. In other words, if you aren't self-loving and you're self-hating, I've never met someone like that who has a positive life. So if you want to draw healthy people, healthy finances, a healthy physical body, whatever you want to, you've got to be invested in taking care of yourself first. Many of us take care of other people first, and we don't have much love to give. So all positive relationships are born out of the relationship you've established with yourself first.
I like that definition, but I was just thinking when you say loving yourself, because loving yourself oftentimes, and just in general vernacular, is associated with, narcissistic and grandiosity and selfishness. And if you love yourself, you're selfish and you don't care about other people. And right. I know that's not the premise of your book. So kind of let's get into that, because it's really the opposite of that.
Yeah, it's dead opposite of that. I think centered on self is fundamentally different than self-centered. Just as we could differentiate the difference between cocky and confident. Someone who's self-centered is really not at all thinking about other people. They are expecting others to give to them. They are, one minute you're high with them, the next minute you're low. There's no getting in. They have very little insight. They're not focused on anybody but themselves, and they can be quite cruel. Where if you love yourself, I think that you're trying to develop a transformational sort of patient, being able to observe in the world, take things in, mold them around, have some insight, see what you can do with that to make your life better. And then if you are happy and you're loving, then you can be a wonderful parent, you can be a great friend, you'll have empathy, you'll have all of those things that someone who is self-centered doesn't. Someone who's self-centered doesn't even have empathy. They are considered only, what are you going to do for me? I want what I want when I want it. I don't care much how you feel about it. That's sort of your narcissist. That's kind of classic out there in our world, and that's not at all what my book is about. But people can confuse those things. It can be easy to confuse. So
how do you start out, not winding up being self-centered, but being centered? Good feelings of self-esteem come within, and then that affects our relationships, I guess is what you're saying.
Right.
But so how do we do that? I mean, let's say we aren't doing that, and we are adults and we're realizing it doesn't work for us. I mean, you have had experience in dealing with all kinds of, or many populations. I mean, abandonment, bullying. I didn't mention these at the beginning of the show, but working with people who obviously don't feel good about themselves, aren't centered. How do you change that?
Well, I think that you have to kind of go back to your core wounds, which I think most of them are established very young, whether it's from your primary caregivers or, peers or experiences that you've had that were traumatic, or, just sort of not doing well in school, wherever your low self-esteem comes from. And we all suffer from a little bit of not feeling good enough, which is healthy. But if it's not healthy, then you're not establishing anything in your life that can be great. So what I did in my book is I actually told, in the beginning of the book, I told my story, my personal story, and then after each section there, I gave questions that you can ask yourself and books to read. Every book I've ever read to help myself is in there, and I give a little a synopsis on why the book was so helpful for me. And then I talk about just suppose. Just suppose you could change your life. Just suppose if you thought differently, your life would shift. Just suppose if you loved yourself better, your relationships would shift. Just suppose the people you think you fit with aren't the people that are right for you. And you start to wonder, And I think as you start that journey, your actions follow your thoughts, and you naturally go on a transformational path. But it takes work. A lot of loving yourself is a consistent, conscious effort towards yourself every day to keep yourself positive and going forward and hopeful. And I think being a voracious reader is certainly something everyone should do.
So, Sherrie, I wanted to just back up because, I mean, you're giving us the process of how to transform yourself. And like you said, it takes a long time. But just backing up a little bit, because you in the beginning of the book, you tell your personal story. And I think that would be helpful if you can tell listeners what happened to you or what didn't happen to you. So, I'd like to hear your personal story.
Personal story was painful childhood. Self-absorbed parents. They were too young probably to be having children. Both parents married 4 times each. And I went through quite a bit with my father was fairly involved with drugs when I was little, and my mom was sort of just really wanting to not be alone, so she was consistently searching for a man. And so what happened was there's verbal and emotional abuse, a little bit of physical abuse, and I didn't come out of childhood feeling well, I can tell you that. And in sharing this story, I wanted people to be almost like you were watching a movie so that you could identify with the character. Not everyone has to go through what I went through. Some people have gone through much worse. Mm-hmm. But, feelings are universal. So the way I feel pain isn't necessarily the same way that other people feel pain. What triggers my pain may not be the same, but the feeling is the same. This is why we teach young children emotions so early, because we can all identify on those feelings. And so I teach all throughout my book how to start feeling good enough in spite of other people. So although my father or mother may have hurt me, I can make them accountable for that. But if I stay in blame on that, I'm never going to grow.
Okay, so the difference. What's the difference? That's a really good point, because I think many of us, so maybe all of us, are in that position. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you grew up in any kind of family, mm-hmm. whatever the family is, there are always those issues, like you say. Some are more extreme, some less extreme.
Sure.
But that blaming and accountability are 2 different things. How do we work that out?
Well, I had to work through that one. And sometimes I'm still working through that one. What I had to do is I realized that if I was angry or my father hurt me or my mother hurt me, at that point it was my hurt because it's inside me. So they may have given it to me, but now it's mine. So if it's mine, I have to fix it. So if I stay in blame, then I'm not making it mine anymore. I'm making it theirs. They did this to me. And I can't heal if I do that. So if I can say, this is my anger, now those people gave it to me, I know where it came from, okay, that's where it came from. I've done a fair amount of confronting. My family's quite uncomfortable with my book being out, and because they're not through their own stuff. But that's not my responsibility. So I look at what is my responsibility, which is the magic word, and how can I shift it.
Okay, so give us I think this is such an important point. So give us a specific example, actual example between something happens, and instead of, very specifically, they do something, they gave it to you, but how you respond to whatever they gave you that's negative that's your responsibility. Give us an everyday example of like what your mother or your father did or has done that becomes your responsibility to change your reaction to it.
Okay, so one of the first poems in my book is my father was tickling me. And I was squirming and laughing and giggling, and I accidentally kicked him, and he was furious. So he was cursing at me, and I sat up, and I was like, oh, my gosh, you can hit me back. And he socked my face. Okay, so I was bleeding, and he got up. He was shocked about what he did. He cleaned me up a little bit, put some ice on my face, and he went down the hall and left me by myself on the couch and locked himself in his room and cried. So I got up, went and took care of him. And he was sad, but I think he was sad for himself because he left me. So I talk about in the book that he left me by myself. I needed him to come to me and tell me, oh, my God, I'm so sorry. I should not have done that. I lost my temper. But instead, I went down the hall and told him I was sorry. So I didn't mean to wiggle so hard. You know what I mean? So when I grew up, I was later in my life, I was so afraid of him, but later in my life, I was angry at him. And so I confronted him on it, several years ago, and then we talked about it. He doesn't necessarily have the same perception of me. Now that the book is out, he's telling me it didn't happen at all. So when those things happen and you feel angry, what I did in the back of my book is I give a metaphor of a porch, a yard, and a fence. So the people that are very close to me are on my porch. The people that I'm social with, that I do enough with, they're in my yard. And the people who cannot respect my boundaries are at my fence. So I've learned in my life I don't have to love my mother or father less than anyone I love on my porch. But if I let my father or mother on my porch, they mess it up. And if they mess it up and I blame them, then I expect them to clean it up because it's their mess. And they'll tell me, well, it's your porch. So if I put them out behind the fence, then the HOA can take care of their mess. Okay, so I look at
HOA.
Yes, the housing association in my little metaphor. They can take care of it. So what I do with that is I have to say no when I need to say no, and then I stay out of blame. So I can have empathy for my parents that they're upset that the book is out. Okay, but this is my story, and it took a lot of courage to tell it. And it's not my shame. I was healing this so that I could help lots of other people. Because my story is your average story of a child who had a difficult go of it. And my life has transformed completely because of the work that I've done. So if I allow whatever their reaction is to it to affect me, then I'm letting them in, and I'm going to stay in blame. I'm going to go through all this stuff. So if they snuck in the yard, I just got to put them back out at the porch.
I like that analogy. In other words, this is your story. This is your book.
Yeah.
This is what you have to say about you and your life. And if they don't like it or they like it or whatever, that's their own. They have to deal with their own reactions, is what you're saying, right? Or their own feelings.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I call it separating stuff. That's their stuff. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't want my daughter to write this book about me. So one great thing about my parents is they taught me everything to do differently. And I love them both. And I think that their reactions to whatever's going on in my life is their own shame that they haven't worked on, they haven't forgiven themselves for. They both acknowledge that nothing in there isn't true. But I don't even need that acknowledgement because it's what I lived. You know what I'm saying? So I have to put them at the fence, and they have to work on their own stuff. Now, many people don't do that. They might stay blaming me, and then they can't grow. They can't heal from the information that's out there. So that's the whole point. They can't love themselves if they're totally in blame.
Sherrie, when an incident comes up, because, I mean, I think one carries always is carrying this stuff with us throughout our whole lives. And we all, all of us, and we all have varying degrees of this stuff.
Absolutely.
And so let's say you have your own family. And you said one of the things that you learned is not to do all those things, which was very helpful because you won't do those as a parent. But then sometimes you do it as a parent, or you start to do it, and and then what happens? Then you can kind of, if you understand yourself as you've been describing, you'll be able to stop it, to not do the same thing to your own children.
Absolutely. If you make some of the here's two gifts. If you make similar mistakes to your parents, okay, it humanizes them too, right? Because no one's all bad. So if you make mistakes like your parents, you can understand them. For instance, I've been married and divorced. They were married and divorced 4 times. I understand they're more human to me because now I know how painful it was for me to get divorced. Okay, so that humanized my parents to me. But as far as my parenting has gone, I have been so conscious of me, and I had kids much later, so I was more mature, so I could parent differently. And what I do the most as a parent is if I do something inappropriate, I apologize. What I have found with toxic parents is not only do they not apologize, but they often don't remember the inappropriate behavior.
Yeah, I call that stonewalling, sort of.
Yeah. Stonewalling is a great word. Yeah, it's like, well, I'm not going to apologize, or I don't remember doing that. I didn't do that. That's not how it was. And then all of a sudden the child can't go for any validation to the parent. Kids need three things. They need time, attention, and listening. And if you can give those three things to any relationship, even aside from your children, you will have an awareness about that other person that you could never have. I didn't get time, attention, or listening, so I also married someone who didn't give me time, attention, or listening. So you repeat those core wounds all throughout your life. You're always going to have an opportunity to love yourself better if you have awareness.
Yeah, I was thinking about the thing you're talking about, your daughter or your child, and you, and apologizing. I think that's something that I try to do as well. And I don't think I necessarily ever had parents who apologized either. And but I sometimes, and I have three, and I sometimes find myself, when they confront me with something, getting defensive and not being able to apologize for it right away. And then I'll think about it, and I'll, mull over what they've told me, and then I'll be able to go back and say, you know what, maybe you are right. But it doesn't always happen immediately.
I actually think it's deeper the way that you've expressed it. Because if you take thought on something, you are already expressing to your children that you care for them. To enough to get through your own defenses, to think about it. If you apologize sometimes right away, it's, well, I'm sorry. A lot of parents will apologize in that way. Well, I'm sorry. Well, that's not an apology. You know what I mean?
No, that's just trying to get it over with. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Why are you sorry? So at least if you take time to reflect on it, you go back to your children. Not only are you apologizing, but you're apologizing with information. I'm sorry because.
Yeah, so
someone can do something to you and apologize to you 30 years later. And if the apology is genuine and coming from a place of empathy, that apology will heal.
Yeah, but when you listen, and I agree with you. I mean, I think you see a lot of these apologies, even on television with politicians and celebrities, and it means nothing. I was thinking about some of the scandals they've had, and the sex scandals, and apologizing, but there's really no meaning. There's no substance behind it.
Nothing. Yeah, they've been caught.
They've been caught. I better say something.
Yeah. Boy, what's the best thing to say? Oh, my press guy says sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Say you're sorry. Exactly. So writing this book, and maybe people who haven't written books like yours don't realize, the courage it takes to do this. Like you say, this is like exposing yourself and your family and all the dirty laundry that we all have, but still it's right out there for everyone. And were you scared? And what were the feelings like when you actually did it?
It's so interesting. When I initially wrote some part of the book, my story comes in the form of poetry. And my poetry is not obtuse or hard to read. It's very direct. I don't know why it came out that way. Maybe it was less painful. Then every poem is followed by self-help and questions and juxtapose and what if you could do this and wonder about that. And it's so loving. The book is just so loving at the end of the day. But when it first came out, I was not going to do anything with it. And then the woman who forwarded my book, she's a national bestseller. Her name is Sark. She's written some phenomenal books. Somehow magically ended up meeting this woman and gave her my work. And she's like, oh, my gosh, you would help millions of people if you wrote this. And then I still wasn't sure that I wanted to do it. But the book took 7 years to write. The poetry was written in 12 days. It vomited out. I don't even know where it came from. I'd never written a poem in my life, ever. And so that just came out, and I was like, okay. And then I sat on that for a long time. And I don't believe my parents ever really thought it would be published. Because it had an agent for a while, it did a whole bunch of stuff. And then as I continued writing it, it didn't get published initially. It just wasn't ready to be born yet. So I continued writing, and Susan and I added all kinds of different parts. She forwarded and endorsed the book, which I'm so blessed about that. It does take courage because for me, maybe getting some family secrets out there that my family thinks are secrets, yet anyone who knows my family, everyone knows what we went through. It's really no secret. But to them it is because they have shame around it. And facing the backlash of them now that it's actually published was not something I expected, because they had known I'd been writing it for 7 years. So it's bringing up all their own wounds, but they're at the fence. That's their stuff. So it takes courage. But I think the purpose of being here is to help other people. I mean, a book will let you know you're not alone. Someone else has been through this, and someone else has been through it and healed from it. So to me, I'm gifting something amazing to the world. And the people that have read it, the reviews it's getting on Amazon, it's incredible. No one's like, this is a parent bashing. That's only my parents' experience of it. I don't think anyone's really even going to think of my parents are going to think of what I did, how I did it, and that they want to do the same thing in their life because they don't want to be trapped in unhappiness. We have one life. You know, we have this one life, and I just don't want to live it unhappy.
Well, I mean, after this book, as you say, you're talking about the reactions to this book and all. I mean, think about, I mean, you have the book, but then you're also online with this, right? I mean, and you have what published in some of these online magazines. I mean, this gets around. This is like this is a sort of a global kind of presentation, I guess, or you know, as people around the world have access to this book and have similar, similar if not the same kinds of problems. So,
I mean, I see 40 people a week in my office, and there's not one of them that I can't identify with. You know, right now on my Facebook page, I'm writing a lot of little blogs on crazy makers and how to deal with them, and the response to this is crazy. It's getting shared all over the place. I have around 12,000 fans, and, you know, it's going everywhere, and it's such an interactive. I love my Facebook fans because we interact all day long, and literally they're getting free therapy.
I have to join your Facebook page.
Please. I would love that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Crazy makers. Let's talk about crazy makers.
Okay, let's do.
Yeah.
Crazy makers are like vampires. They cannot see inside themselves. So when you're dealing with a crazy maker, I think the most frustrating thing is that you know that if you could get through to them, they will understand you, but you can't get through. So the pain comes in with toxic people is being on the other side of them is you want them to hear you. Because, see, normal people can have a conversation, which is mutually beneficial. But when you're with a crazy maker and you try to have a discussion explaining your perception, you get sucked down in kind of a black hole where you're fighting for your life, you're telling your truth, and you're trying to have your dignity, but all the while you're just losing.
All right, let's talk. Yeah, give us examples of that one, because I'm going through this list in my mind of the crazy makers and the situation, and be feeling like that when I'm having a conversation, like just going right into that black hole because I'm not going to win. In
fact, the more you speak, the more you lose.
Yeah,
because they're voracious in verbal warfare. What I have found with them is if the emotions that they have don't match the facts, they will manipulate the facts to match their emotions, and they will speak it as if it's undoubtedly the truth. So you leave more confused than you leave settled, which makes you, just by your nature, want to clear the confusion even more. So you continually try to have the conversation, and there just will be no victory.
Give us an everyday example, just, that we would encounter, either with a friend, a family, colleague, just, put it in a context.
Okay, so I had a patient who continued to mess up her schedule with me. And I would text her, and I was doing some extra work on there that I don't usually do, but I got sucked into the crazy maker thing. So I was texting her when her appointments were. She was still missing. Well, I have a late charge if you don't come. So she called me on the phone raging, cursing at me, raging at me, and she's not going to pay my late charge, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And the minute I tried to explain anything to her, first of all I heard was noise. There was no getting through to her. So what I did is I sent her an email, and I explained the facts. Okay, then she sort of calmed down, and she's like, okay, well, then I want to come in. And I actually terminated her. Said, nope. There's no good reason to rage on anybody for any reason. Therefore, I won't place myself in that position again. Had I taken her back into my practice, it just would have happened again. Yeah. So she can't hear me, so I don't know. I terminated her and referred her somewhere else.
So, okay, that's a great example. Now, but okay, let's bring it closer to home.
Okay.
Let's say that, that's business, or that you're professional. But okay, Sherrie, so what if, say it's your sibling, and it's somebody who is going to be in your life on some level, and we won't say parent, we'll use sibling, and same scenario, or a different scenario, but it's the same kind of an example of a crazy maker.
Okay, so my brother called me a sellout, for the book. So I said to him, well, maybe you should go on Amazon. Well, first of all, maybe you should read the book. Maybe note to self, you should read the book. I know that neither my parents or my brother have read the book. They've peeked in it. Okay, so he called me a sellout, and I said, well, why don't you go on Amazon and look at the reviews? I have 5-star reviews on this book, multiples of them. And why don't you check out to see what people are saying, because I can guarantee you they're not going to mention our parents. Or you, for that matter, because he's barely in the book. And he put getting reviews for trashing other people, classic. So there is no point at that point for me to do any more explaining. So I put love you, and he put classic. Okay? So what I do with that after the hurt goes through is I say, okay, there's no getting through. If I try, it's going to get worse. So there's one remedy to deal with toxic people. And I have people in my office weekly dealing with a boss like this, a friend like this, a boyfriend like this, a girlfriend like this. They're everywhere. So there's one remedy. Don't engage.
When you don't engage, does it stick in your craw? Let's say, because I keep going back to the fact, okay, a patient you can terminate. You probably won't see them again. But your brother, on some level, is it an emotional kind of don't engage, and then the next time you talk to him or have to talk to him, you just don't let it get to a certain point, or you, what? Yeah.
He's at the fence.
That's the fence,
so, intimate conversation, not ever going to happen with him. He's not ready to heal his own childhood. Okay, so it's not caring even of me to say, hey, come in my yard and let's talk about it. Although I would love that, because I think healing is the best, wonderful, transformational thing we do here. But I can't force him to be where he's not going to be. He's not grown enough. He doesn't want to do that work. So he's got to stay at my fence. So let's say that I see him at my fence. I know that the only positive conversation that can come from anyone at my fence is going to be a superficial, hi, how are you, what's going on, basic conversation. Then I go down, I'll lean against my fence, hey, what's up, have a little conversation. If it starts to get anywhere deep, I will remove myself. Because that's like, if I don't, I'm going to jump in the Alice in Wonderland hole, fall down that black hole, and get in total confusion. And then I'm going to leave feeling bad, and I'm going to go, oh, my God, what happened?
So you have to remove yourself from the playing field.
Absolutely.
Then you can't
boundaries.
you can't play boundaries. Then you can't play the game, or he can't play the game. The game's over.
The game's over. Now, the crazy maker is always playing the game. I don't even know that they're conscious of it. Okay, they think they love people as much as anybody else does, but their actions and behaviors totally destroys their love for other people. It undoes it. Okay, so when you're aware that somebody's like that, and you're aware that they're going to do that over and over again, if you continue to go back to the dry well and expect a different behavior because you want a different response, you're just going to engage in a fast-forward washing machine that you cannot ever win. You cannot win. So you have to love yourself enough to respect how far they can go and how far they can't, and don't push it further than they can't understand or have awareness on.
And getting back to the family thing, because I think these are great, these are great examples. But is there a lot of pain associated with that? It would seem it's.
Sure.
When it's people who are, or your expectation is that they would be able. You could engage with them.
To
be supportive, or to be intimate, like you say, intimate versus having to be superficial with your brother or your mother or whoever it is. Not whomever, but somebody that you expect to have some intimacy with and then can't, or a spouse or partner.
Yes, it's a tremendous amount of pain because it's rejection. However, it's also great material to continue writing about because everyone's living this on some level with someone. One of my Facebook fans wrote to me about her mother after one of my Crazy Maker posts yesterday is literally jealous of her. And her mother cannot be happy for her. She's got 2 beautiful kids, a great job, and a husband, and the mother ignores her success or demeans it, devalues it, and this woman is in so much pain because what child doesn't want the approval of their parents? And it's so hard to understand. Why can't my parents be happy for me? And so I was writing to her about doing some reading on crazy makers, borderline mothers, or whatever, so that she can understand it's not her, it's her mother's deficits, but she's going to have to grieve the loss of really ever having this mother's support. But you can still have a love for that mother if you can figure out what kind of relationship you can have with her, even if it's very superficial.
So what could she do, or what would she do? And that's not an uncommon situation.
No, it's not uncommon.
It's very common.
Yes. Confronting this mother will not work because this mother does not have insight. So the only time confrontation works or there's transformation is someone has to understand what you're telling them. And if they just have the no sign up, so what this girl has to do, this woman has to, she has to change her expectations of her mom. She has to find out who her mom is, and I would read a ton on these people so that you have an understanding, because then you have skills. Okay, my mother is not going to be able to be happy for me in these areas, so I'm going to go to other people for that support and happiness and accept that as sad as it makes me, this is who my mom is. So
in other words, being really specific, because if I get a raise at work and she's going to be jealous of that because perhaps she doesn't even have a job or never did work, I can't expect her to be happy for me. So I don't even share that with her. I share that with somebody else. I get it from somebody else.
Yes.
Is that it?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
yes. I keep most of my successes in my life private because there is not the kind of support that I am looking for that's going to come from my family. But there's so many people in my life that adore and love me, that are happy for me, that's where I have to be grateful. The trick on the personal part on my end is to not be resentful, I can't get it somewhere else. The mind does want to focus always on what you don't have, what you don't get, and whatever. You've got to train yourself to go, but look what I have right here. This is why so many people discuss gratitude. If you want to take responsibility for your happiness, force yourself to look at who is giving you the stuff you need, because it's there. Yes, you're not getting it from the people you want to get it from. That's a core wound. Work on that. Write in your journal about it. Read a book about it. The more you do that work, the more acceptance you're going to have, the less you're going to need it. And then in the meantime, focus on all those chosen family people that you have that can celebrate you, because they're all there, and they are as meaningful as anybody else.
That is so, to me anyway, that it makes so much sense. I was recently at some big family gathering, which of course brought out all of these issues.
Of course.
And feeling really frustrated, and kind of in the middle of it, or when I was back in my hotel room, I called my best friend, who's a psychologist, and ran some of the stuff by her. And I got a lot of support, a lot of advice or whatever it was, and it really did carry me through the weekend. So what you're saying really does work.
It really does work. You just have to shift your mind from these people should, these people, why aren't they? They should, they have to, they have this role. The thing is, well, who says? That's just what society says. If we get caught in that, we're really going to be stuck, and then think about it, we'll always be in blame. So you've got to look, you have to just open your mind. Really successful people are open, flexible people. And I talk about this a lot in my book. You've got to get out of those rigid ideas that your family owes you something, because they don't. If they're not capable of giving it, they can't give it. You can want them to be capable, but that's not going to change anything. So look around to who else is there waiting to love you, waiting to celebrate you, waiting to be your best friend, waiting to take you out to dinner for your, congratulations, this happened, that happened.
Would you say, Sherrie, you have to be more deliberate? You have to really and maybe you don't want to be, you like things to be spontaneous. One would like things to be spontaneous, whether it's family gatherings or, meeting with your boss or your employees, but you really do have to think ahead of time. Now, this person, because people that you're forced to be in a situation with, whether it's family or work, that you really need to sit down and kind of go over it in your head, like very, it's very conscious about how you're going to respond or act.
Mm-hmm. When someone's a crazy maker, you're going to feel anxiety and trepidation even over the thought of seeing them. So the minute that you have that feeling, you've got to start to make a plan.
Yeah.
Because, family reunion comes up. People have this going on. And people come into my office. They're already anxious a month before it's going to happen, so.
Or holidays, Christmas and Passover and all of the,
all of it. It's just and it's not even about the holidays. Right. Like, oh, my God, so-and-so's going to be there. I'm going to have to deal with them and blah, 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 and be conscious. And the other thing, too, when you're looking at going into those scenarios, I always look at it as just hold your own. Focus on your body language. Focus on who you are. Do not let someone make you forget who you are. And just hold your own. Sometimes we're so outside of ourselves that we go into those and we're so anxious that we can't stay connected, and then we're not being who we are, and then we leave and we're even more upset at ourselves like, God, I totally lost who I was in that situation. Why did I do that? So if you go in conscious of being who you are, then you're not going to lose yourself.
And I think the more you practice that, especially in toxic situations, as you're describing them, the better you get at it. Because
absolutely. And it takes practice, because the triggers can be so unconscious for you that you're losing it before you know it. But here's a great thing. Sometimes you might have to do something not very good to start doing it well. So it just takes practice.
So give yourself a break. Nurture yourself, which is what you're saying, and then you can go from there. And it does take time, and I think that's really important, because I think most of us, I think you want it to happen right away, and it doesn't.
No, it doesn't. Again, we still need to give ourselves time, attention, and listening, right? We have to give that to ourselves, too, and be forgiving, and none of us are perfect. And even if you're as conscious as you can be and you think you're as healed as you are, I can tell you these people will find a way to trigger you, and you can still lose your noodle.
Yeah.
So just go back to the drawing board and go, oh, boy, okay, here I am back in this class. What did I do this time that I still need to work on? And it's a great learning experience. If you could look at it all as opportunity, then you go, okay, I went to this class, I failed this one. What do I need to do better? Then you're still growing. Yeah,
you're still growing, but I think the word is what you said, opportunity. You must be a fantastic therapist. I mean, it's not just, I guess it's humanistic philosophy, but you put it in terms that we can all understand, and very practical terms. I think that's important.
Yeah. It is practical, and it's usable, because some things that are out there that are written, you can't even put it into practice, let alone understand it. And the reason I wanted to use my story was because I wanted to become human so that I could reach the humanity and the fear and the vulnerability in the reader. And I think that is something so magical and different about my book. It's not your average self-help book, because it actually tells my entire story, and then the end of the book is a practical system of self-assembly. How in the heck are you going to put yourself together after all of this and keep it together? I'm happier and happier each year that goes by in my life. And I'm certainly not perfect, and I certainly am still in the throes of dealing with family drama, but I look at it as it's like the peeling of an onion. This is just another opportunity for me to work on a core wound in a different way. And every reaction that's happening right now to my book will be in another book, because how many of us go through having a major success in our life and it's not supported by the people that love us? So how am I going to deal with that? I'm dealing with it, and I'll write about it.
Well, you've seized on it like you described it, as an opportunity. Here you wrote this book, and your parents perhaps and your brother are not going to support you, but the whole world is supporting you, or you get all of this feedback from the rest of the world saying, hey, this is, thank you, and look what you've done for me and what you've done for everybody. So it's kind of, it's what you write about in the book.
If you bring up 3 people's issues with your book, but you help 3 million, then that's a gift. And that's how I look at it. And the book is so lovingly written, and it's about me. It's not about anybody else. This is my journey. And I think that as we share our stories with each other, we connect. We realize we're not alone. We realize we've all traveled this insecurity, this not feeling good enough, body image issues, or I'm not smart enough, I'm not this enough. We're human. This is the human journey, and it's all opportunity. If we could look at it that way, and it's just one life class after another life class. There's a test to pass, and you got to pass it to go to the next level. It's never going to be without challenge here in this life. So if you can embrace that and look at it, that's how you become who you really want to be.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's a challenge. It's opportunity.
Yes.
Otherwise, it could be boring. I mean, and so
really boring.
Yeah, really boring. Everybody accepts you and loves you, and there's no problems and there's no tension. And now, what do I do?
And even then, you wouldn't know who you were.
Yeah.
You'd be like, well, why do people love me? What did I do so great? So we can't know up unless we know down. If I didn't know pain so well, I would never be so embraced in joy.
And you've done it. Yeah.
I've done it. Absolutely, I've done it. I'm continuing to do it, obviously, and I continue on the path. And some days the path is hard as heck to walk. But if you just get up and you suit up, keep going, you will pass through the lesson.
Well, that's a good lesson to leave to your daughter. You have your daughter, one child?
One child, yep.
How old is she?
She's 8.
Well,
Love of my life.
Yeah, she has a great. I was going to say mother and mentor, both. Yeah.
Yes, I'm happy to be able to be that for her, and I've parented her not by her behavior but by her emotions. Mm-hmm. So it's been a different little form of parenting that I've done, and it's worked out so well, and we're as close as can be. And I'm sure when the teenagers hit, I'll hit my bumps and struggles with her. But I think what I've established early on will carry us through, because she is starting off with something I never ever had.
Yeah, well, she has a strong base to go through all of the other stuff, as you say, as a teenager.
Does.
Then I have to talk to you again.
Yes, let's do that. I love that.
When she's a teenager. But, we have to say goodbye. It was really a pleasure talking to you. And I know everybody who has heard your story and can also hear, obviously, I want to mention the book again, Loving Yourself, The Mastery of Being Your Own Person. Sherrie Campbell, PhD, psychologist, and you're online too. Give us the
I'm online. My website is sherriecampbellphd.com, and you can join my Twitter and Facebook from there, my blog. And it's full of information. It's free. You don't have to go pay anybody for it, and you can interact. And I'm always on my Facebook interacting back. So you can buy my book there, and you can just be connected to me. And I love people. So if you come to me, you're going to get loved, and you're going to get advice if that's what you need.
Great. And that's obvious. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a beautiful day.
Yep, you too.
Okay.
Bye-bye. We only have a couple minutes left. What a great psychologist and individual. Yeah, I think she had a lot to say. Yeah. Did you relate?
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of the things that she was talking about, I mean, especially, I was never abused as a child, which is a wonderful thing. But I certainly, can look back on situations with my parents and say, like, well that's that, and given a new perspective, an easier way to work around those things. And the thing about seeing people who you don't want to see, that's so true. That stands for everybody, because I know a lot of crazy makers.
Yeah, we all do.
Yeah,
that you have to.
Hopefully, I'm not one for.
Yeah, me too. I was thinking, maybe I am.
Like, I don't know. But when I have relatives that are just kind of like annoying and crazy, or people in my circle of friends who I don't necessarily want to see, but it's important to not make it seem like they're a problem for you.
Right. Don't jump into that pit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as you get older too, I mean, like, you're still in school, but even just when you go out and get a job, you run into the job that you have to keep, and you've got a boss and an employee, and you have to be there with them. So, I mean, all of this stuff I think works well in terms of being able to handle it. I mean, sometimes the people you can walk away from and leave at the fence, that's fine, or that you'd never have to see again, or as she said, professionally, you don't have to have this person in your practice. But it's those people who are always going to be at the fence or maybe even in the yard that you do have to deal with. And so that's what she's talking about in the book.
Right.
Yeah. And you know what? You have it. It's a microcosm. I'm sure here, we were talking about earlier, you're trying to bring the station together as a manager. This stuff comes up, or these issues can come up amongst students, amongst how things are run. So, any organization, that's what's happening.
Well, what I've seen is that, last year Nicole was our general manager, and she was really great. I also noticed that when it came down to, having a problem with somebody, she would but she would not hesitate to reprimand somebody. And this year, Jason's kind of the opposite, and kind of, doesn't want anybody to feel like, they've done anything wrong. And I think that both of those methods are fine, but I think that there's an in-between, there's a middle ground that's a good place to be. Because if people do things that are improper and they know they're doing something wrong, or maybe they don't realize how wrong it is that they're doing it, that it is to do, I think that's wrong, and I think you have to bring it to their attention. But I also don't think telling them to F off is...
Yeah, you don't have to go after them.
Yeah. But I do think it's appropriate to, not call somebody out, but call it to attention.
So that's a good note to say goodbye on, because that's your speech. But you're gonna bring it all together. You're gonna, right?
Yeah.
The great compromise, and then you'll be able to accomplish even more. Noah Bondi, running for manager of WCDB.
Yeah.
I'm Kathryn Zox, your social worker with a microphone. You're listening to the Social Workers Radio Talk Show on WCDB FM, University at Albany. Have a great week, and Noah and I will see you next Thursday.